episode 134 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Kristen
and Catherine, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all of the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine.
So, since we're swiftly going into fall, I don't know about other places, but like where we are, the weather has just like taken a turn, especially this weekend. Like it really feels like fall out there now.
Yeah, so it's like we have really, like, I'm looking outside and it's gloriously sunny, but you can feel like the bite, like the chill in the air. It's not like you go outside and it's like super warm and like luxurious. It's like you could feel the crisp.
It's very much sweater weather. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really get warmer in the day, which I know a lot of places in Canada, like in the morning it'll be cold and then by the afternoon you're sweating. But here, at least today, it's just gloomy. Not really gloomy, just cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I figured we could talk about our fall reading plans, kind of like we did our summer ones. And do you have any fall reading goals or like thoughts, concerns?
I mean, my goals are always to try and read what's on my shelf. And I keep like putting it off and putting it off. I don't know if it's considered a fall reading goal, but I finally gotten through The Haunting and The Hunting of Adeline. They were wild on TikTok for a while, and I'm late to the party. But I finally ticked that off the list. But otherwise, yeah, I just want to get through my shelf, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that, like, some good books come out this fall.
Yeah.
That we can...
I know I was like, there are a few books that I know are coming out. Like, I forget the name of the new book, but The Serpent in the Wings of Night. That duology's over. Yeah. But there is a new book coming out of a new duology, the beginning of a new duology. I think that's coming out in November or October, can't remember. And obviously the new Fourth Wing book is coming out in January, but that's very far away. It's not very far away, but you know. Yeah. But those are the only ones I can really think of that like I want to read.
Yeah, but I'm more thinking about like those sort of the ones that are like not super popular that are gonna pop up. Like the undersold ones that can be just as good.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's a new, like, you know how Fourth Wing like exploded?
Yeah.
Maybe the new one is, maybe like there's a book coming out that's going to be the new Fourth Wing that's going to be like so good that everyone's going to get obsessed with it.
Yeah, that would be good. Although I could do without another 5-book series that's coming out slowly. That part scares me.
Yeah.
But like a trilogy or something like that, I could get on board.
Yeah. Or even a one-off. I'd be okay with a one-off.
Yeah, there's a lack of one-off books in fantasy.
Yeah.
It's very much a genre that like there are multiple books in every series.
Yeah. But I mean, I sort of see why. Like, if you have to build an entire world, obviously it's really hard to build the world, build your characters, have them, you know, go through everything they need to go through. Just doing all the building that needs to happen while having your characters undergo, like, the struggle, and if you are making it romantasy, then falling in love, and, like, it's a lot to fit into one book. So I get why it exists. I just, sometimes you're just like, oh, just give me a cute one-off, and then I'll be done.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, in the same vein, like, if you are going to come up with a huge world, like, obviously you want to be able to go back to it, because, like, it's easy to write a second book in that world once the world is made. So, yeah, I do get that. I just, it just feels like every book lately that I've been reading is a series or something like that.
Yeah.
Not that I've been reading a lot, so.
I actually just looked because sort of the next book I really want to tackle is A Fate Inked in Blood, because I've heard a lot of good things. And I just looked, I was like, I don't know if that one's a series or not. And I just looked, and sure enough it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I don't really have a plan, I guess, this fall. I feel like I'm in a slump, so I kind of want to get out of that, but I don't know how.
But, like, do you not find the best way to get out of a slump is to read something you've already read?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's funny, I just looked at, like, some of the books that we've read in the past, and I was like, oh, should I just start reading Vampire Academy again?
Why not?
So, I might do that, because it piqued my interest. Because I want to start reading some of my, like, TBR as well, but I think I got to a certain point in 2 books that I'm reading right now, and, like, in one of them, the couple is happy, but there's still, like, 100 pages left in the book, and I'm like, I don't want to keep reading this, because obviously something's gonna happen, then it's gonna be fine in the end, because I think it is a standalone, but I'm like, I don't want the unknown.
Yeah.
So I think I am just gonna have to read a book that I've read before, because I'm not ready for anything new.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's my fall, is gonna be some rereads. That's what I'll commit to.
Do you know what, actually? I don't know if you read them all or not, but do you remember Katie Robert and her Touch of Taboo series?
Yes.
Did you read all of them?
I think so.
Okay. Because I also just read all of them, and I loved them so much.
Yeah. They are very good.
Now, I think the Guardian one, so I think there's 4, are there not?
I can't, well, there's like...
So I believe there's 4 in the series, but they are standalones. Like, they don't have anything to do with each other, but they are all related in that they sort of are about taboo subjects. So, the one I liked the least was the one where the girl, like, seduces her guardian.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was to be fair, it was the role play bit that I wasn't really a fan of. I thought it was weird.
Yeah.
Not if you're into it, but it just felt weird for them to be replaying moments of their past. Like, it's just odd for me.
Yeah. I didn't dislike it as much because it felt like she was leading it. But if he had led it, I don't, like, it's been a while since I've read them. But, like, if he was leading it, it would have felt way more predatory. But it still had that undertone of, like, she was a child in your guardianship.
Yeah.
So it's weird to want.
Yeah. And then the thruple one was probably next. Like, I still liked it, but it just felt weird that they, like, had sex together for, like, a couple of days, and then it was like, we want you in our marriage. And it was like, yeah, that was just felt very fast.
Swift.
Yeah. And then I feel like that, I can't decide, the one with the girl and her ex-fiance's dad.
Yeah.
That one.
That's the only one I can remember. What was the other one again?
The other one was the girl going to her dad's best friend.
Oh, yeah. I think in my head, those are, like, almost the same.
Well, it's just funny, because the one where the girl goes to her dad's best friend, she's, like, goes to him to try and convince him to, like, for this, architect contract or something. And then it starts to rain, and she's like, I'm gonna leave. And he was like, you can't. It's too dangerous. It's gonna rain for days. You can't go out there. You could get hurt. And she's like, okay, I'll stay. And I'm like, you can't stay. Like, you can't go out in the rain. Like, it's rain. Yeah. And, like, I don't know if that's, like, a product of our upbringing, like, just where we live. It's like, it's just rain. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't know. But in my head, I was like, this is such a shitty excuse to have to... Yeah. Like, what, you can't go out in the rain. Like, give me a fucking break.
Well, it's the same as all those Hallmark movies that are like, oh my god, it's a snowstorm. And, like, I know snow isn't, like, it's very hard to actually see. Like, when it's a snowstorm and you take a video of it, it's very hard to, like, actually see how snowy it is. So I'll give them a bit of benefit of the doubt, but it's still always like, that's nothing.
Yeah.
That's like a normal day.
Yeah.
This is stupid.
My God, we have been in school so often when we've got, like, rainstorms and, like, even, like, decent snowstorms. Like, if we're supposed to get 20 centimeters, they're like, you can still go to school.
Yeah.
Or you can still go to work. It's just nothing. Anyway. But yeah, so those are actually probably some of my favorite reads over the summer. I had a really great time with them.
Mm-hmm.
I know that wasn't our topic.
They're really good.
But, like, I felt the need to discuss them anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Yeah. So that's our fall plans, I guess.
Yeah. So we're going to go into it now. Just a heads up. This is not a spoiler-free zone and things might get saucy. Do they?
A little bit?
They didn't really for me, in my part.
Don't remember.
So this is week 3 with Kingdom of the Cursed by Kerri Maniscalco. And we're reading chapter 16 to 25 this week. So last week, Emilia learned that, so first, I guess, Emilia and Wrath sort of get all hot and heavy down in the underworlds, and then she gets hurt, and then he tells her that, surprise, she's not engaged to Pride, she's engaged to him. I still don't remember, like, so she signed a contract for Pride, but it's null and void? Is that what?
Because she's engaged to him, right. I guess. Like, I think.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really, we don't really understand.
Yeah. And, like, all that's left for them to do to, like, be married is have sex. So that's fun for them. So I guess she gets angry about that.
About him? Yeah, because also, like, everybody in his court knew except for her.
Right, which is really fucking awkward.
Yeah.
Which it does come up, that does come up to in this week. And so I guess because she's lashing out at him, because she doesn't want to settle for less than, like, a loving marriage. That's what she wants. And she does eventually want to go back up to the mortal world and be with her family again. So, like, she doesn't really want to marry Wrath, I guess.
Yeah. And she didn't really want to marry Pride either.
No.
She just wants to know who killed her sister.
Right. So, I guess she decides, because she's angry, she's going to go visit House Envy. I guess she got an invitation to go visit. So she goes to visit, sits down with him, they have a lovely dinner, and he tells her that she can actually spell a truth spell on food and wine, and then whoever eats or drinks it has to tell their truth. So both of them, she does it to both of their cups, and they spill truths to each other, and he asks if she wants to see his room of, like, treasures and curiosities. So that's where we're picking up now. It's them going to see his, like, I'm calling it a museum, because that's how she feels when she gets there. So, Envy brings Emilia to his, like, room of treasures, and she says it feels like a museum. There's statues and sculptures and all kinds of stuff. And she says she feels this sense of deja vu, even though she's never been in a museum before. And, like, Envy even says, like, you know, I've modeled, like, mortals in the upper world have modeled museums after this. Mm-hmm. But she's like, well, I've never been to a museum. So, you know, there's that. So it's weird that she's getting this sense of deja vu.
Yeah.
And they just walk around. He's showing her, like, different statues and sculptures and things like that. And they approach one statue, and Emilia finds it beautiful, and she's like, it's definitely my favorite in here. And it's an angel with wings, and it's, like, in the act of being shoved down, but, like, there's nobody else shoving it down. It's, like, just an action pose, I guess, of being shoved down or something. And Envy tells her it's the Fallen. And remember last week, didn't she ask something about, there was like a question on who the Fallen were, and she said, are the Fallen the goddesses or the princes? And at the time we didn't know.
Yeah, because it was like in the whatever, the matron or whatever her name is was telling her about the pool and like something about something being cursed, and brought up the Fallen.
Yeah. So she then asks if it's supposed, because I guess the body, she can tell, it seems like it's Wrath's, because she knows his body so well.
She does. We want her to know it better.
Yeah. But like at the same time, in her head, Pride is the one that gets shoved out of heaven. You know what I mean? Like, so she asks, is this supposed to be Wrath or is it Pride? Or she says Lucifer, I think. And Envy sort of gives her a non-answer and tells her it's his interpretation of his cursed brother. And he wanted to...
So Envy's interpretation of his cursed brother?
Yeah, so okay. I think Envy has had the statue commissioned.
Yeah, but it could be either of them, because he didn't say it's his interpretation of Pride or Wrath.
Right, he just said his cursed brother.
Gotcha.
And he said he wanted to memorialize the moment his brother lost his precious wings. Which Emilia sort of finds surprising, that he would want to remember something so sad.
Yeah, but we also got last week that he, like, is pissed at Wrath. So
yes,
it kind of makes us, or me, think that, like, this could be Wrath, because he's like, fuck him.
This is gonna sound bad, but, like, I forget. Are all the princes fallen angels?
I don't know if we ever get that. I kind of think it's just, like, that is the myth of Lucifer. So, like, we assume, but... And she called Wrath a fallen angel once, and he was pissed. So, like, I don't think we know for sure. Okay. But it kind of seems like it.
Okay. Anyway, so they move on, head to the next room, and Emilia is drawn to, like, this area where there's, like, a bookshelf, and then she feels a hum similar to in book 1 when she found Vittoria's body, and there's a book sort of on a plinth, like, covered in glass, and she looks at it, and it's La Prima's grimoire that she lost the night she confronted Antonio. And she says, you have it, so you're the one who took it. And he says, yes, he was having the monastery watched by a spy and took the book when she wasn't looking. And then he tells her that the Prima grimoire is really only one part of, like, a bigger book. It's part 3. And each part was written by one of the goddesses, the Maiden, Mother, and Crone.
Yeah.
And the Prima actually stole the Crone's Book of the Dead. Which is, like, shocking for Emilia, because she's like, no, sir. The first book of spells belongs to the first witch, not goddesses. But then Envy's like, I don't know who's been raising you. Or, like, what witches you grew up with, but no. These books belong to the goddesses, and the witch stole it, and the crone was pissed.
Yeah.
Then he tells her that he has the mother's piece and the crone's piece, but the maiden's piece is missing. But then he attributes it to the goddesses being tricky, which I didn't really get, because I'm like, wouldn't they want their pieces back? So, like, it just sounds like, oh, the goddesses are being tricky, and it's like, why would they purposefully be keeping it from them? Wouldn't it be more likely that they want all of the pieces back themselves? You know what I mean? I just don't understand why he thinks, like, the goddesses being tricky is keeping the book from him. Surely it's just they want the book in their possession.
Yeah, it kind of makes me feel like, is she the maiden? Are we gonna, like, I don't know. There's so much happening this week that I'm like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. It's a decent idea. So Emilia suggests, like, finding the crone herself and asking. And MB is like, yeah, okay. Let's do that. Like, he is very much on board with that plan, even though she was kind of, like, kidding. So, something he says kind of he just says something, and it reminds her of what one of the skulls, her enchanted skull, says. And she thinks maybe he's the one sending the skulls to her, because right now she doesn't know. Then she asks if the crone's book has necromancy skills in it. And he's like, well, yeah, it's the Book of the Dead.
What else would be in it?
And then he tells her, like, it just seems very off topic. That he just switches gears then and starts talking about Bloodwood Forest. And that it's in between his territory and Greed's territory, and no demon can lay claim to it. So technically she can travel there without invitation, but the trick is when you have to cross through another's territory to get there. So essentially, I feel like this is him saying, you're already here on my territory, now would be the time to go in there.
That's what I assumed was going to happen.
Because that was his big thing. It's tricky because you need an invitation to get into either mine or Greed's territory in order to get there. But, like, I don't really understand why he felt the need to tell her about this forest. Like, it felt like he was just sort of, like, talking about one thing and then, oh, by the way.
Yeah. Clearly he thinks that she can find something there that's also helpful to him, but I don't really get it. And I did think, like, oh, obviously now is the time to do it. Yeah. Why would she wait? She doesn't know if she's going to have an invitation to Envy again or to, was it Greed?
Yeah.
So, I just assumed she'd go today.
Yeah.
Especially since she was like, Wrath, I won't be back.
Yes!
For a while.
She was like, if I come back.
Yeah.
Anyway. She asks him about the temptation key, because when they were sitting down to eat, he told her that 3 things could, like, have you either see the past, present, or future. Like, there's 3 items, and if you use them together, and you, like, use a spell, it'll help you either see the past, present, or future. And so, like, if there's a mirror, there's a book, and there's a key, or something. So then she asked if he had all 3, and that's why he was like, let me show you to my museum. So now she's like, okay, well, do you have that key? And he said he doesn't. But he's been trying to get it. He's been looking for it.
Yeah.
And then he just tells her, he was like, oh, I have to leave. So, like, before you go, there's a plaque over there for that painting that you should read. And then he just leaves. And leaves her alone in this, like, museum-y place.
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, weird. So she checks the painting, and it's like, the painting is just a painting of a tree, and it's got, like, black and silver veined leaves, and it sounds very nice. And the plaque tells a fable of the cursed tree, which is a tree in the Bloodwood Forest that was planted by the crone herself. And the tree will consider hexing someone's sworn enemy if in their heart of hearts they want to curse them. If it's what they want the most in the world, to curse someone, then the tree will consider it. But to request the curse, they need to carve their true name into the tree. Their true name. Like, how many people don't have a true name versus a regular name?
Well, in this book, Wrath, Pride.
I know, but like other than the 7 princes, who else has a true name versus a given name? You know what I mean?
Well, I'm starting to think Emilia based on what happens this week. Yeah. The confusion in my brain is real. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Anyway, so they have to carve their true name into the tree, write their wish on a leaf, and then offer the tree a drop of blood. They then take the leaf home, sleep with it under their pillow, and if when you wake up, the leaf is gone. The crone has accepted your offering and granted your wish. So, I don't know if, like, Envy is setting her up to do that, because he told her where the Bloodwood Forest is, and now he's showing her a picture of the tree and telling her about this fable about how to curse someone.
Yeah, I just can't figure out, like, what he's getting from it, you know?
I assume in my assumption, he's hoping that whoever her enemy that she would curse would be someone that he also would want cursed.
Yeah. But, like, are we thinking it's Wrath? Because, like,
no.
She loves him. She doesn't yet, but, you know?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say it's Wrath. I feel like, and, like, again, I'm speculating based on where we are in the current book. I'm not projecting the fact that I've read the rest. Like, based on the evidence we have at this point, I feel like maybe they're trying to get her to solve the curse issue. Because, like, they've been trying to say, like, we can't tell you things because of this curse, and, like, there's greater forces at play. So I feel like they secretly want her to investigate and figure out who's cursing people and then maybe curse that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like maybe they want because, like, he's like, let's be friends.
Yeah, and he kind of was like, I know he was a dick before, but he was kind of, like, trying to say that he was on her side a bit. So I think that, like, I don't know. I think he is trying to be. It's just he's not very good at it.
Yeah. I think this is actually who the next book is about, Envy. Like, not the next book, but I mean, like, the new book? The Throne of the Fallen.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
I think.
Cool.
Anyway, so on her way out of the museum, before she leaves it, she finds a map of the 7 circles and sort of tries to memorize as much as she can. And then she heads out, and there's a servant waiting for her, and he tells her that Envy is gone out and will be gone for some time. So, like, several days is the assumption.
Which is, like, why is everyone just leaving her places?
I know, you would, like, their friendship is very tenuous. But I also feel like it's just bad timing on her part.
Yeah.
Because, like, he can't help it if he had a prior engagement.
Oh, well, yeah.
So he said, the servant then says that Envy told him to tell her that if she really wants to make Wrath angry, she should sleep in his bed naked and pleasure herself. And that there's a painting of Envy on the ceiling.
Ooh.
But, like, very much something you would assume Envy would have, right? Like,
oh, yeah. And the whole jealousy thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how I envision Envy, but for some reason it's not hot.
Well, that would make sense, because that would cause him to be envious of other people that are hot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's just not in my head. I don't know what I picture him as, but it's just not. I'm not like, he's a super hot dude.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, like, when I think of Envy, I also think that, but, like, I'm trying to think of how I picture all the princes now. So, like, in my mind, Gluttony is, like, a bit on the heavy side. Sort of like Henry VIII to me. To me, that's Gluttony.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Pride is, like, this handsome pretty boy with, like, Justin Bieber hair.
Yeah.
Sloth, I feel like, is nerdy. And maybe a little, like, disheveled and, like, needs a shower.
Makes sense.
Lust, I feel like, is, like, hot as fuck.
Yeah, and we met him in the last book. I think he's supposed to be, like, hot as hell.
Yeah. And what else is there?
We always do this.
I don't know. Greed.
Yeah.
I feel like greed is, like, your stereotypical, like, dude on Wall Street.
Yeah.
Like a investment banker.
Yeah, I can see that.
Anyway.
I am annoyed that there's no, like, hot women sins.
Yeah.
Like, I want them to each either have a counterpart or one of the main ones to be a woman, and that to be, like, a twist.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that would be cool. Anyway, so she says no to sleeping in MV's bed. Like, knowing he wouldn't come in, like, he's not coming to, he wouldn't surprise her as imminent or anything like that. So she says no, but then tells the servant to send word to Wrath that she'll be back in the morning. So, like, she's already leaving, which I find just, like, so odd.
Exactly.
Like, she left Wrath because she was pissed and was like, I might not come back, and yet she's coming back immediately. She stayed for one dinner.
Yeah.
And, like,
shouldn't she just look around some more before she leaves? I find it so weird. And I get why, like, it comes up why she's leaving quickly.
Yeah.
But still, it's like, if you're there for a reason, why don't you do the reason?
Yeah. It just seems so weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the next morning she leaves. Wrath actually doesn't come get her, but sends an emissary who's, like, really bitchy.
Well, this is where I was like, wait a second. Last week, Kristen said that this wouldn't come back to haunt us, and it does. I was like, she lied. I'm sure you just didn't remember. But
wait, what? What are you talking about?
Last week, remember, she was like, did he have somebody before I came? Like,
but it's this. Well,
she wanted to be. They
yes,
weren't actually, but. Like, obviously she's taken, like, she can't be with him now because Emilia's there.
Yeah, but, like, we'll get into her in a second.
Yeah.
So, she's really bitchy towards Emilia and and she's like, where's Wrath? And she's like, he's occupied!
Yeah.
And, like, they're, like, in the carriage and she tries to, like, look through the curtain and Mrs. is like, keep the curtain closed! So, like,
yeah,
she's a real asshole.
Unnecessarily bitchy.
Yeah.
Because women can't like each other.
Well, yeah. Anyway, so, like, Emilia actually wonders, like, oh, did she have relations with Wrath? And that's why she's being bitchy towards her.
Yeah. Which I was like, Kristen said no. She said this didn't happen.
Yeah, I may have forgotten, truth be told.
That's fine. It made me think that it can't be that big of a deal.
Okay, so we get back to the manor, and Mrs. like is bitchy towards her, and then like sort of stalks off, and then Emilia just goes into the manor, and like there's nobody there. Like there are staff there, but like Wrath is not there, Fauna is not there, Anir is not there. Like there's no one that she could talk to around.
Yeah. Which is so weird. You're like, Wrath was like,
wasn't he like, anytime you want to come home, just send word and I'll be there?
Yeah, and he was like, all up on her. Yeah, he was all up on her and everything, and now it's just like, ghosting.
So she like goes and knocks on his door, and like he's just not there. So we get sort of like, she just goes back to her room and just grabs Pride's journal and tries to go through it. But again, she doesn't understand the language. And then she hauls out the Prima's book that she stole from Envy's museum, for lack of a better word. So that was why she was so quick to get out of there, because she took the book and was like, I need to leave now. And so we sort of get a montage of her going through her day alone, like doing shit all. I think she tries, if I think I can remember right, she tries to do some magic training, but like she can't access her magic at all.
Yeah, feels like there's a block there, and she's like, I must be tired. Yeah. I didn't sleep at Envy's house.
So then she's like thinking to herself about like what she can do, and she's like, maybe she's thinking she could spell all the food at the feast and make all the demons eat it and reveal the truth about Victoria's death. But like, she thinks to herself that she wants to test that Wrath can't sense the spell first. So she wants him to be able to test it. So she wants to put a truth spell on him.
Which is funny because she had this whole, like, moral dilemma about it before. But it's weird that she didn't ask Envy if he had any involvement in Victoria's death. Like, wouldn't that be your first question? Like, isn't that... You had the prime opportunity. Or even just ask him if he knows who it was.
Yeah. It's just so weird. It's like almost like she forgot why she was there.
Yeah. I just am so confused. I guess then it wouldn't be a trilogy. Maybe we would have got too many answers.
I also feel like maybe she's not a good plotter. Like, she's not good at this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which is like, to be fair... That's probably how I would be if I were in the situation. But as a heroine in a book, you're like, do better.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. You want her to be, like, cunning.
Or even in this moment to be like, shit, why didn't I ask Envy? Like, to realize, because that's what would happen with us. Like, we'd get back from the dinner and
we'd be like, oh, shit.
I had the prime opportunity and I fucked up.
Yeah.
Replaying everything and being like, God damn it.
Yep. Or like thinking, well, this is what I should have done, and like replaying it differently in your head.
Yeah.
But like, what I don't, funny. I don't understand why she doesn't want Wrath to know.
I think she wants to just test and see if, like, if she spells him, if he can't tell, then maybe she'll be able to spell everyone and no one will know that they're being spelled. Right. But she could also just be like, hey, I'm going to give you this wine that's spelled. Let me know if it works.
Yeah. Anyway, so she's alone for like 3 days just on her own before Anir shows up at her room to take her on an adventure, he says. He's really just taking her to a different room, but he calls it an adventure.
Well, for being in her room for 3 days, it's an adventure.
But, like, she also didn't have to sit in her room for 3 days. Like, she wasn't locked in there. She could come and go as she pleased throughout the whole house. Mm-hmm. And, like, we don't know if she did.
Yeah.
So, he takes her to the weapons room. And he's gonna teach her some self-defense. So, they go through a lesson. He's just, like, teaching her proper stance and stuff like that. And she asks where Wrath is, but he just changes the subject and says, like, I didn't think you liked having Wrath around.
I love him.
I know.
He's so, like, I love him so much.
And she's just like, I don't. And he's like, yeah, right, like, I can totally see through you. Mm-hmm. And then she mentions the emissary bitch. She's like, yeah, what was up with her? And he actually tells her that she is the daughter of a duke and thought she would make a good match for a prince, so that's why she became an emissary. So her family is House of Wrath, so that's why she's a House of Wrath emissary. But she doesn't care which prince she makes a match with. She just wants one of them. So I don't know if she was specifically pissed at Emilia specifically, because she doesn't care if she gets Wrath.
Yeah, but it's probably also, now thinking of it in this situation, because before I was like, God damn it, it's going to be one of those, she's catty because she wanted Wrath. But obviously, Emilia was just with Envy, and Envy wanted to sleep with her. Not wanted to, but said he would. So, like, it could be that she's just jealous that she has the, like, invitation of other princes and has this opportunity to, like, network with the princes and get one.
Yeah.
When she already has Wrath, basically, too. So, like, it's probably just jealousy.
Could be. Anyway, so Anir, like, tells her, like, this is why this girl became an emissary, to be closer to the royals and to sort of be able to parade herself in front of them all. But Anir tells her, like, all the princes are happy as they are, and, like, none of them want to get married, apart from, obviously now, I guess Wrath? Like, does he want to get married?
Well, we still don't really understand this whole thing, like, if he gets married, he gets more power. Like, I don't really, like, that was said at one point.
It is going to explain it in a little bit.
Oh, well, never mind. Sorry, I'll shut up.
No, I agree with you, because I feel the same. I'm like, how does it work? But then Fauna explains it to us in a little bit.
Okay, because I was like, why does nobody want to get married? Aren't they all under this, like, same dealio? But I don't know. We'll wait till you get
Yeah,
there.
that I do remember about, so I can't really say much about it.
Okay.
So she then asks if Wrath had somebody before she forced the betrothal on him. And Anir doesn't really answer. He's sort of like, would it matter? And she's kind of like, yeah, like, and he just says, like, it's not his place to share Wrath's story. So I feel like this is yes, he did have someone before.
Of course. Yeah.
Which hurts.
Or he's just stirring the pot to be like, which would be shitty. Like, I don't think he'd do that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe he just wants drama.
It does hurt my heart, though, that he had someone before.
Well, I want to know who. And based on shit that happens later, I want to know if it somehow was her. Like, this week blows my mind in that I'm like, things are piecing together and my brain has like extrapolated to like situations that can't be real. But they might be. I don't know. I don't know anything.
So like, she doesn't want to be tied to Wrath if he's like pining for somebody else forever. So Anir asks, like, would it change anything if he had someone before? Like, would that change your answer and your feelings towards the marriage? And she says yes, it would. So like, I feel like she's insinuating that is a lot of the reason why she's holding back is because she thinks he had someone else. If she knew that he didn't, she'd be more open to agreeing to the marriage, I think.
Yeah. But it's almost in like she doesn't want him to be forced into it either if he loves someone else. Like it's very much in a like she wants him to have happiness. Yeah. It's not like he had somebody else, I don't want to be with him because he's sullied. Like, you know what I mean?
No.
Like
it's more of a she doesn't want him to be in love with someone else being married to her.
Yeah. Which I appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Yeah.
So then, of course, the moment that happens, that he says, would it change anything? And she says, yes. Wrath is behind her, hearing all of that. And thinks, and he says, oh, careful. Like, you may make me believe that you kind of want to marry me after all. Which I was like, oh, of course, Anir set her up for that.
Yeah.
And then he actually sends Anir on his way to take over the lesson, and he says to Anir to lock the door and don't let anybody in until he says so. So, like, shit's about to go down. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't want to train with him, and I will say that this scene is sort of one that a lot of people that have read the book get really upset about, because of the consent piece.
Yeah.
So she doesn't want to train with him, and she's about to leave, but he starts using his magic and makes her feel like overwhelming laziness and sloth. And like, she just like collapses to the floor with her like head on the ground and just doesn't want to move or get up or anything. And then he sort of removes that piece, that like, he removes that layer of magic, and she's pissed and stands up again. But before she can respond, he puts lust on her. And all of a sudden her thoughts are that she just wants to have sex with him. And like, she's, you know, just like trying to like sidle up against him and flirt with him. And she just really is in like this haze of desire.
Yeah.
And then he's like teasing her a little bit sexually, but like doesn't touch her. Mm-hmm. So he teases her a bit, but then he puts envy on her. And it just like makes her immediately jealous of like him being with other women. And I guess he gives her enough of a break that she realizes he's using his powers on her. And she's pissed all over again. Mm-hmm. But he counters that like, she asked him to help arm her against his brothers, and this is how.
Yeah, and he was like, I'm only giving you a weapon if you train against magic too, and she kind of forgot that part, and it's like, that was key.
And to be fair, I feel like this is the more valuable piece. Like, what
God,
good is a
100%.
weapon if the prince can immediately make you drop it?
Or kill yourself.
Yeah, like literally. So,
yeah.
Then he puts lust on her again, and he tells her to strip. And he's hoping that she'll fight against the order.
Mm-hmm.
And she tries, but she can't.
Yeah.
So she takes off her pants and then her shirt. But he does tell her to, like, keep her underwear on.
And it, like, I do understand it's very non-consensual, but I do feel like there is still this underlying, like, she wants him, and there's this magic about their betrothal that is, like, making them want each other. So it's like, it's doubly hard for her to fight this.
Yeah.
Because there's all the other attraction and shit, too.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'd find it super hard. I'd be like, well, I just want to fuck you anyway, so I'm going to take my clothes off.
And, like, she says that he looks really angry, that she is letting him do this to her. And in the back of her mind, she is angry that he's doing it. Like, because there's still a little piece niggling at the back of her mind that knows it's wrong and knows what he's doing, but she's not, like, strong enough to push it away. So he tells her to, like, sway her hips, and she tries so hard to resist, but she can't. So she does, like, she does a little dance. But, like, I wrote down that it feels like weird magic because it doesn't just, like, make her do things. She wants to please him and doesn't understand why he's angry. So, like, he's angry, and apart from that little tiny part at the back of her head niggling that it's wrong, most of her is like, oh, I'm swaying my hips, like, I want him to be turned on by me. And, like, he keeps ordering her to do things, like, get on her knees, take off his boot, call him master. And she keeps asking, like, does this please you, master? And, like, all this stuff. And he's like, no, it's not. And so in her head, she's like, well, what can I do to please him?
Mm-hmm.
And then he also tells her, like, he could make her accept their marriage. And, like, he could fuck her. And she would enjoy it. But, like, he doesn't want that. He wants an equal.
Yeah.
And then he makes her grab the dagger that's on his calf. And then he uses wrath, like his own power, on her. And then he ends up goading her into stabbing him over and over in the chest, like right in the heart. Even though she's tried to fight it. Like, she tried really hard to not. And then he releases her finally from his power. And, like, she feels sick because he's bleeding. Even though he's already immediately healed. Like, obviously it didn't kill him, but it brought back her trauma of seeing Vittoria and finding her body. And, like, she, at this moment, she says, like, she can't forget the sound of stabbing him in the chest and, like, what the knife going through his chest bone, like, she can't forget that sound. And she is, like, absolutely fuming and, like, calling him a monster and everything.
Yeah.
But he tells her if he was a monster, he would have left her the way Lust left her in book 1. So, like, in book 1, Lust used his powers on her, and then when he took them, now, I mean, he took them because Raph stabbed him and he just, like, disappeared. But when he took them, Emilia felt really vacant for, like, weeks. And was just, like...
And her family gave zero shits.
Yeah, family gave zero shits. But, like, she was just vacant in her room and, like, didn't care about anything and, like, wanted to die. So he was like, if I was a monster, I would have left you like that. But he purposefully... I don't know if it was the order in which he did the powers to make her not feel that way, or if he can just, if he is allowed, like, if there's something about his power where he can choose to leave them vacant or not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
But he is, like, equally murderous that she didn't, like, he's just really upset. And in my head, I'm like, that she didn't, like, train well? Is it that she submitted so easily to everything you did. Like, why are you angry at her?
Yeah, and it also feels like punishment for, like, going to Envy at all. Like, it's very... He should have gone about this a better way.
Anyway, so... so he tries to, like, taunt her into using her magic, but she can't. And then he just... I guess he's, like... I don't want to say he's disgusted, but he's disappointed in her and just says, like, we're going to be training every day until the feast so that you can protect yourself from my brothers.
Which is so smart. Like, this was a bad session, but she does need this training. If all of the brothers can do this to her, she's fucked.
Yeah.
She's absolutely fucked.
Oh, so she asks, like, why he had to make her stab him. Like, knowing, like, in her mind, he knows about her traumas. Like, he was there for a lot of it. So, like, why would he do that specific thing? Like, why pick that? But he just says, like, he gave her an outlet for her vengeance because he knows that she's, like, lost in revenge. Like, I feel like he knows that that's why she's here. But then he asks, like, did spilling his blood make her feel better? And in her head, she's thinking, well, no, it didn't. And he just...
She's like a metaphor for revenge.
Yeah. And he says that vengeance is a poison for the soul. And if she submits to it, she will twist into something she doesn't recognize. So I guess he's trying to teach her that, like, revenge, like, if that's what she's going for, revenge is not going to help. So she sort of wonders about the timing of these lessons, that he's starting them now. And I'm like, you've literally been in the underworld for, like, 3 days?
Yeah.
So, like,
and you've been flippy-floppy about hating him, loving him, like, when else,
So he just pretty much tells, well, okay, no, she has to have been there for a week now at this point, because she was by herself for a few days.
Oh, yeah, true.
So he pretty much tells her that they voted on the feast. Like, that's where they were for those 3 days. So they voted.
That's why Envy was gone,
that's why Envy was gone, yeah.
And just put that together, thanks.
So they voted for the Feast of the Wolf guest of honor, and guess who it is? Like, he says, I have no doubt that it's gonna be you. Like, he doesn't have the results yet, but he says, it's gonna be you.
I want to know who he voted it to be.
Oh, yeah. I want to know who it's been in the past.
Yeah, I want to know everything.
And he tells her, like, he didn't tell her that they're going to start the lessons because his brothers won't ask when they use their magic on her. So, like, his intention was to show her how vulnerable she is, not to shame her. But she just sort of says, like, you want an equal? You need to treat me like an equal. Fair. And, like, I get it. And most of me is like, yes. But I also understand the need for him to be like, I'm going to surprise you with this. Because I do think that aspect of training is important. Like, the element of surprise. Because she's not going to expect it when it happens.
I know, but I think, like, you have to give her some training before you start doing surprise training. But they don't have a lot of time, so I do understand, too.
So she's sort of pissed and just, like, goes back to her room and goes to change. And she opens her, like, her, what do you call it? Her wardrobe. And one of the enchanted skulls rolls out. And at that exact moment, Wrath just walks into her room and sees it and asks what it is and where she got it. And he's mad, but he does ask her, like, calmly. And she's just sort of like, what are you doing here? Because she's still really angry at him. And he's like, I came to apologize. Like, I guess he already realized that maybe the way he went about the training wasn't kosher.
Yeah.
But she just sort of dismisses him and tells him, like, because I guess he's like, why didn't you tell me about these skulls? And she's like, I'm going to keep things to myself, like, until you give me a reason to trust you. Because especially after these him, like, the way he went about the training session, she doesn't trust him. So she's like, why would I tell you? So he just sort of is like, I feel like he accepts that response. Like, he's like, sort of like, that's fair. But then he says, like, do you mind if I take these to, like, a safe place? And she's like, well, where? And he says, my chambers. So, like, I guess he has a safe room or some sort of place where he could put them. Yeah. And she demands, she was like, fine, but anytime I want to see them and investigate them, you have to tell me. You have to let me.
Yeah.
And then she says, if you learn anything from them, you have to share it with me. And he agrees with that, but he says, I'll agree to those terms only if you have dinner with me tomorrow. And her response is just, no. No, I'm not going to tell you that I'll have dinner with you. Like, this is not a bargain. Like, we're already bargaining. Like, she's agreeing to give him possession of the skulls if he shares information with her. But then he's almost, like, tacking another demand on top of it. And she's like, no, whether or not I agree to have dinner with you, these are the terms.
Yeah.
And she just sort of says to him, like, in the training room, I will agree to the magic. Like, to you using your magic on me. But outside of it, he needs to treat her with respect, or she's just going to be gone. She's just said, like, I won't stay here. I don't know where else she's going to go. But she sort of just says, like, it's not to punish you, but for my own, like, mental well-being.
It's a boundary.
Yeah. It's a boundary. She's laying them down.
It's like, yeah, it's one healthy, like, portrayal of boundaries that, like, your boundaries aren't stopping someone else from doing something. It's you setting your boundaries, and if they do something, you're going to react in a certain way. Yeah. So it's actually, like, I appreciate the, like, portrayal of a boundary as somebody who does therapy.
Mm-hmm. So he sort of says, okay, and she still doesn't tell him whether she would go to dinner or not, and I think that's valid. Like, I think she should wait to talk to him about it. So he goes to leave, but then he sees that she has Pride's journal. And he tells her that if she's been trying to read it, she won't be able to, because it's not written in a language you can translate. It's that they're spelled, so that she needs his permission in order to read it. And she asks, like, will you give me permission? And he says he doesn't really know. Like, he doesn't... So, not that... She's not asking him for permission at this point. He just sort of said, like, she took it and hid it from him, right? Like, she took it without asking. And he said, like, if you had asked, I would have given it to you. Or I would have let you borrow it. And she said, okay, but would you have given me permission to read it? And that's what he says, he says, I don't know. Like, he's not sure if she'd asked him previously, would he have given her permission to read it? So now she just has a journal that's useless.
Yeah.
So the next, I guess, sort of little scene is, there's like a time, like, we don't know how long later it is. It's a certain point later, either same day or next day. And she's outside the castle, the manor, and she's in like a maze on the grounds. And it's freezing cold, and she sees a statue that's really beautiful that she's drawn to. She's drawn to a lot of statues. But, like, all of a sudden, Envy shows up. And I'm like, how did he get there? He doesn't have an invitation. And isn't that the biggest issue?
Yes. This is a declaration of war. Isn't that what we already learned?
Yes.
Like...
But, like, I'm wondering, is it actually him? Is it an apparition of him? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, did he send, like, a hologram? Yeah. He couldn't send her a letter?
Yeah. Anyway, he tells her that he knows that she stole the book from him, and he cursed it, so that whoever took it would be cursed. So, Emilia's cursed now. And at first she doesn't really know what her curse is, but then he asks if she's been able to access her magic lately. And we know that she has not. And she realizes that her magic is, like, just gone. And she offers to give the book back. And I'm like, a little too late for that.
Yeah, it's, like, obviously this was gonna happen. Like, I think he did it on purpose.
Possibly.
But, yeah. You can't just take something and there be zero consequences.
Yeah.
It's not his first day with a collection of things.
No. So she offers to give the book back, and then she's like, how about we make a deal? But Envy's like, no, I'm okay. He just likes that she's powerless. He's like, you can keep the book. And then he disappears. But before he leaves, he sees her staring at the statue. And then she hears this, like, wail come from underneath it. Like, somebody is, like wailing, like, screaming. And Envy just says, don't focus on it. And then he disappears. And she just thinks that whatever is under there is, like, heartbreaking. And wonders, like, what's going on down there. Because, like, Wrath is... He's cruel. No, he's not cruel. Like, he's exacting. And he will, like, mete out punishment to those who deserve it, but he isn't intentionally cruel.
It is very Hades coded.
Yeah.
Like you said last week or the week before.
Yeah, like, he will punish you, but he's not going to be cruel about it. He'll just, he'll give you what you deserve. So, like, whoever is down there wailing in heartbreak, there has to be a good reason for them to be doing that. Mm-hmm. So, then the next day, Fauna comes to visit. So this is the moment where we get sort of the deets on the whole more powerful thing. And Emilia thinks that she's been spending a lot of time looking through texts the past day, trying to undo her curse and get her magic back before the feast. But the only two ways to do it are to get the cursor to release her, so aka Envy, or she has to find, like, the web of magic and find the knot, like, holding it together, and snip the thread. But if she snips the wrong thread, she could die. So she's a bit hesitant to do that bit. And I'm thinking to myself, like, will the web be somewhere nearby because the curse is on her, or, like, because the curse is based in the book? Like I would like to know how you find a web of magic. Are all the webs in the one, like, in a cave, and you gotta go look for them and find the right web for your curse? Or, like, is it invisibly near the book because the book is what's cursed and she has to, like, use a spell in order to make it visible? Like, I don't get it.
I kind of assumed that it was, like, inside of her.
Oh!
Like a web inside of her, and part of it's her life,
and
part of it's...
Oh, that makes so much more sense. I was so confused. I'm like, where does she have to go looking for this web?
Yeah, no, that's just what I kind of assumed, but I have no idea.
No, it makes sense, because if she snips the wrong one, she could die. I was thinking of this, like...
outside of her body
but
situation.
If it's inside, that totally makes sense. Anyway, so her and Fauna are just, like, hanging out in her room, and, like, Fauna's ordering, like, tea and cakes and stuff. And she finally receives at her door an invitation. And it sort of finally tells her which house is going to be hosting the feast. And she opens the invitation, and it's going to be at House Gluttony. And she is indeed the guest of honor.
Imagine.
And I guess she sort of shows Fauna the invitation, and she's like, ooh, this is exciting, because apparently Gluttony's parties are, like, really wild, and nothing is off limits, and, like, like, the food is limitless, the drinks are limitless, like, there's just every sort of type of debauchery you want, you can find there. And in my head, I'm thinking, like, all of the princes sort of have control over all the sins, right? Because, like, otherwise, how else would Wrath be able to, like, use his own magic to put different sins on her? So they can all control all the sins to a certain extent. So, like, I just don't understand how this party is going to be different than any other party.
Well, yeah, I don't get why his are so different either.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't they all be like
Especially
this?
lust,
That's
carnal debauchery, like, you would think lust would be all over that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really understand the difference.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, so, like, yay, carnal debauchery. I guess we'll see. But she does see that, like, Emilia's stressing out, and they try and, like, hatch a little plan, because Emilia's, like, stressed out about having to unveil her deepest fear, and her and Fauna, like, Fauna's just sort of, like, I guess Emilia makes this, like, offhand comment about, like, oh, you know, it'd be nice if my greatest fear were, like, the fact that I can't dance, and, like, I'm gonna make a fool of myself in front of all the princes. And Fauna's like, why don't we do that then? Like, let's get you a potion that makes you a terrible dancer or something like that. And then, like, that'll be your greatest fear revealed. So, like, it's a way. She's trying to come up with ways that Emilia won't actually release her deepest fear to everyone.
Yeah.
But she's still stressed out. So she's like, here, like, I'll take you somewhere. And just like Anir, it's like, oh, on an adventure. But all she does is take her to the kitchen.
Yeah.
And the staff are like, oh, you know, hi, Lady Emilia. Like, we've stocked it per Wrath's specifications, and you're free to come in and use it whenever and however you want. So, like, that's nice of them, or of him and them. But, like, it's just, she's like, oh, Wrath, like, stocked it for me, not, like, knowing that eventually I'd find my way down here.
Yeah.
So she gathers all the ingredients for a berry ricotta pie. And, like, she's working by the window, rolling out dough. And, of course, Wrath and Anir are outside training with their swords and sword fighting. Not their penises. They're not crossing swords that way. Like, literal swords. And, like, Emilia sees Fauna watching Anir and, like, staring at him. And asks if she's in love with him. And she's kind of coy about it, but, like, admits, yeah, she would be all over that, like, immediately.
Yeah.
Then they finally get into their conversation about the betrothal. And Fauna tells her that, like, Wrath has been really patient with her for not forcing her to accept the marriage. And Emilia's just like, so he should rape me? Like, so that we're married? Yeah. And Fauna's like, no, you will not need to be coerced. Like, if a prince sets his eyes on sex with you, then, like, he'll make you want it. And, like,
that's still not consent.
No. You can't, like, I don't know, I feel like you can't, like, make someone so turned on that they say yes when
that's
they're...
imbalance of
yeah,
power.
When they're not turned on, they would say no.
Yeah.
And then she says, like, technically, Wrath has been the one without choice this whole time because you forced the betrothal on him. And then sort of says, like, the betrothal is all anybody in the house of Wrath is talking about. And Fauna then says, like, having a co-ruler brings power, and that people have been talking lately about Wrath losing power. But, like, he's not actually losing physical power, because Emilia's like, what are you talking about? He's, like, the most powerful prince ever. Like, he's got so much power. And she's like, he's not losing, like, magic. He's losing his heart, and therefore his authority. So, like, everybody is confused about why he's letting her decide whether to accept the marriage, and not just seduce her to accept it. And the court sort of believes that, like, if Wrath cannot control things, then how can he control and care for his people? And Fauna sort of uses the example of, like, his clothing. And Emilia's like, yeah, he's a well-dressed dude. He needs to be well-dressed all the time. But she's like, no. Like, imagine if he had a loose thread on his, hanging from his jacket. Like, the people would think that if he can't care enough to snip that thread and look presentable and polished, then why would he care for them? And then she says that a distracted ruler is dangerous and signals weakness. And that for him to be distracted by her and trying to, like, let her decide is endangering his own court because he's being distracted by her. So, like, she's like, obviously he cares for you because he's giving you choice, and he's focused on you instead of focused on his court. So, like, obviously he cares. Mm-hmm. But she thinks that, like, Fauna didn't say anything about love. And she feels like she must be in house greed because she doesn't know how she can settle for a marriage without love. But, like, she's thinking, like, he respects her. He's attracted to her. But, like, she also wants him to love her.
Yeah.
Anyway, later that night, Raph sends her a note telling her to come to training and to wear the crimson gown. She wants to ignore his request, but, like, thinks better of it. So she gets ready and she goes to meet it.
Yeah, so they're at training, and he's telling her to use her anger to, like, hold her emotions. And when she feels the magic coming, she needs to focus on her own will. So he's kind of actually, this time, trying to explain to her, like, how to
actually do it.
Yeah, because last time he was just like, do it. No instructions. And she feels a bit awkward because last time she stabbed him. So, you know, that makes it awkward.
Does it?
Imagine. She says that if she masters the lesson tonight, she wants to see him begging on his knees. And I'm just like, okay. And he says, like, greed is the one that's interested in wagers, and he isn't. And she says that his pride, like, it's his pride that he can't stomach surrendering and, like, even the thought of getting on his knees. And I just feel like it just keeps coming up, this whole, like, him and pride thing. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I've really spiraled into, like, conspiracy theories about this book this week.
But see, do you understand now why I immediately had to go into the third one?
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
It's just like, you're on the verge of learning so much shit, and then it's like, oh, the book is over.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. So yeah. He can't stomach surrendering to anyone, even his potential wife. And he says, when he goes to his knees for her, it will be to conquer, not to surrender. I'm like, is this foreshadowing that's not actually true? Because, like, he's saying sexually, like, when he goes on his knees for her, it's like to make her feel good and
to
shit.
Conquer her vagina.
But it makes me wonder if there's going to be a scene coming up where he does kneel in front of her and surrenders, and, like, she whatever, you know. Just, you can't say something so definitive in books without the exact opposite happening. So he tells her to unbutton his clothes with magic, and she starts moving, but she does end up stopping herself before she does it. And then he says it again with more power, and she starts undoing his armor and is, like, at his belt when she, like, snaps back to herself and stops. And he says that she's distracted because, like, she should be better than this, and I don't. It's
like her second
practiced other than that one time. Yeah, but anyway, she does say that she's distracted because of the feast, which makes sense.
But also, like, and that's what they need to prepare for. So, like, bitch, you better get undistracted.
Yeah, right. But she says, like, she's heard that Greed's parties are legendary in their debauchery, and he says all parties have sins. Like, kind of like you just said, but that's not why she's worried. And she says she thought that she would have a choice of, like, the host, which is what he said. So it's interesting that, like, she didn't get to choose who was hosting. I don't really know if anything comes from that. He tries to kind of comfort her, but she says it's because she doesn't know how to dance. And he just says, like, she doesn't need to dance with anybody, but she knows that it's useful to be able to, like, dance with the brothers and the princes and, like, talk to them to get information. And then he says that, like, at the Lust bonfire thing, she was a magnificent dancer then, when she was, like, had no inhibition and was just feeling herself. You're like, that's not the same thing, but it is sweet. So then she notices that there are, like, daggers there, and he tells her that they're throwing knives, and he shows her the target, and, like, basically we get into a tiny montage of her learning how to throw, and that it's all about standing, and all that stuff. And she does get one to stick into the target, and then he takes her hand and says that they're starting a new lesson, and he starts dancing with her. Which is sweet, because she was like, I'm afraid I don't know how to dance. And he was like, well, let's work on it. Like, he's nice sometimes. Anir shows up then, and he asks if this is a goddamn ballroom now. And he asks if they'll be teaching all the soldiers or just the pretty ones, which is just, like, so petty, and I love it. But Wrath says a good fighter is skilled in weapons, and a great fighter is skilled in dance. And maybe Anir will have to teach the soldiers going forward. So they're just barbing each other, but it's cute. Yeah. Anir says then that he has news from the dungeon, and the mortal is asking for Emilia. And at this point I was like, oh yeah, Antonio's a person.
Yeah, he exists, here somewhere. And, like, everybody has forgotten all about him.
Yeah, including me.
Yeah.
So they immediately just, like, go to the dungeon, and it's, like, the door is completely unguarded, but it is warded and locked, and it opens for Wrath, and it also opens for Emilia, so, like, she could come down here on her own if she wanted to. And they go inside, and it's, like, a breathtaking view, and he's just there with a book and some tea, and she's like, what the fuck? Like, why is he in such
cushy, like, he's not, like, in a dungeon.
Yeah, he's not strung up on the wall, like, crying like she wants him to be. So yeah, she immediately wants to attack him, but Wrath holds her back, and she knows that her reaction is extreme, but she's just too pissed off that, like, he killed her sister. Wrath takes her outside the room, and she realizes, like, that was a test too. So she ends up, like, calming herself a bit, but then just, like, ends up turned on by Wrath because he's, like, holding her. And I'm like, okay, you guys just need to fuck.
Like, they need to get it, not, like, get it out of their system, but, like, there's just too much pent up, like, sexual frustration.
Yeah. It's taking over every situation. He says that they can try again, and she just says that she's gonna kill him. But she does realize that, like, Wrath's not gonna let her back in the room if that's what she's gonna be saying. And she also thinks, like, she did stab Wrath. She knows that, like, that's not something she actually wants to do, and she won't respect herself if she does actually just go in there and kill Antonio. Yeah. So she says she's ready to talk to him, and they go back in, and she's still pissed, but they do kind of have, like, a conversation, and he tells her that he's been taking a tonic to break enchantments. And he brings up that in the first book he told her that he was going to a town and that there were rumors of, like, shapeshifters and a goddess and something like that. And I don't fully remember, but he's kind of implying that, like, when he went to that town, he was enchanted somehow.
Interesting.
That's kind of what I took from it. I don't know if that's completely true. She immediately doesn't accept that and just, like, thinks he's to blame and tells him to accept, like, his part in this. And she just turns to go. And she thinks, like, she thought that she loved Antonio in the first book. Like, she really did feel like she loved him. And then she thinks he isn't half as honorable as the Prince of Hell beside her. And I'm like, of course. Guess what? You're in love with Wrath. She tells him then that, like, when he gets his memories back, to call for her and not to lie to her again or she will rip out his heart and feed it to the hellhounds. And she says, like, wrath can't protect him forever. So, interesting. And Antonio, like, agrees that he needs to earn her forgiveness and begs her to visit him again. So, interesting. She goes to her room then because she's, like, so pent up anger, pissed at him. But somebody, like, knocks on the door before she can, like, draw herself a bath. And it's Harlow, who is, like, a demon with lavender skin and snow-colored hair, but is also kind of, like, a lady in waiting or something. Kind of seems like. Even though I don't think she comes up anymore this week, but she came in to, like, draw her bath.
Does she come up again ever?
I honestly, I haven't read past this week, so I don't know. But it's just interesting that, like, days pass and we don't see her again. Which maybe it's not interesting. Maybe maybe she's part of what happens.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm spiraling with different theories here. But anyway, so she wants to be like, no, I don't need help. But, like, obviously Harlow needs to help because that's her job. So she tells her to, like, put some oils in the bath. And now I'm like, did she put specific oils in to make her fall asleep? Like, is she all part of this too? But I don't know. So Emilia gets into the tub and tries to relax, but she keeps thinking about Antonio, and she's, like, so pissed. And then she thinks, like, maybe he was under the influence of a witch, or maybe a mortal was under, like, demonic possession and, like, influenced him somehow. Like, it could be a witch, it could be a demon. Maybe there is something there. Maybe he was telling some part of the truth. And she thinks of, like, how she felt Wrath's power and knows it can make you do things that you don't want to do. She fucking stabbed Wrath. She took off her clothes, like, all this stuff. But she thinks, like, she still doesn't have sympathy for Antonio.
Jeez.
Which is interesting. Like, it's very harsh.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, like, maybe eventually she will, or maybe he is to blame, but
she still blames him.
Yeah, she's still angry, and he's the only person she knows for sure she can, like, be angry at. So I get it. She ends up falling asleep in the tub, which is why I'm like, what was in the oils? And she wakes up to the door opening, but, like, I feel like this person is invisible. I don't know if that's true, but the way it's written seems like she can't see them. But somebody, like, pulls something linen around her neck and is choking her. But luckily, for some reason in her bath, she's wearing the dagger on her thigh. Which I'm like, you're gonna rust it. Why would you wear a dagger in the bath? I
feel like it's probably one of those, like, enchanted demon daggers that never rust.
For sure. But I was just like, I would never get a bath with a dagger.
I also, like, I don't really understand why she, like, I'm glad she did, because obviously it saved her in this moment. But, like, she hasn't, as of yet, felt, like, in danger in Wrath's home. You know what I mean? Like, she's been safe. And has she ever had an attempt on her life? Like,
I don't think so.
Apart from, like, a random demon crossing, like, coming across a demon up on the mortal world and, like, it chasing her. Like, I don't think anyone has actually come out and tried to kill her. So, like, I don't understand why she felt the need to have the dagger with her.
I guess, like, that one guy was creepy and sexual, and then another guy was talking about eating her heart. So, like, maybe there is some fear there. But still, I wouldn't feel it in my own room, I don't think. Especially since, like, she has been safe so far. So it's just interesting. And I was like, of course she is. So she stabs behind her, and she hits whoever it is. And before she can see, like, she has to pull the linen off her neck and, like, turn around. And the person's gone, and there's just a puddle of blood there. And it's, like, a lot of blood. She's like, shit. So she puts on a gown, and she calls for Wrath, who, like, appears shortly in, like, glittering smoke, and is immediately furious. And he asks if she's injured, but she says no, but the assailant is injured. And his eyes, like, catch on her neck, and she knows that it must be, like, red or something. Even though this never comes up again. She never has any pain from this, and she's perfectly fine immediately. So he asks if she wants to come, and she feels weak, but she thinks to herself, like, she doesn't want to watch what he's going to do. And he tells her that it actually takes enormous strength to acknowledge your limits. And he says a true leader delegates and not to doubt her worth, because he certainly doesn't, which I appreciate.
I'm sorry. She doubts that he loves her?
Right? I appreciate that, like, he says all this, because, like, obviously we're only in her mind. We only hear what she says, like, what she's thinking. We don't really, and she doesn't really even say, like, no, I'm a coward, but she thinks it, and he knows it. Like, he knows her so well, which is interesting, because it goes into more theories, and my brain's like, how does he know her so
Yeah.
I'm, like, spiraling, I swear.
Oh my god.
So he...
That's
what?
the title. That's gonna be our title.
So he walks towards the blood, and I'm assuming he can, like, tell who the assailant is by the blood, which is just interesting. So he disappears, and she sees that, like, he's already got his dagger in his hands. Later, she's in the kitchen, and we hear that, like, Wrath magicked some seeds to grow mortal herbs and vegetables in the greenhouse. So, like, they're already grown, and she has mortal food there now. Like, okay.
So, like, did
Very
it grow
sweet.
in a day?
Yes. Magic fixes everything. So she just thinks that, like, when she's in the kitchen, she feels at peace, and it's what she needs right now. So she knows that, like, she's feeling shaken, obviously, by being attacked. So, like, this is kind of the, like, not mindless, but, like, she needs to be working with her hands, and she needs to be making food to, like, feel better.
Yeah. Which, valid.
Yeah. Wrath shows up and is just kind of, like, standing there looking at her. So she asks if he needs to tell her something. And he says there's little he needs, but much that he wants. And I'm like, have sex.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. On the table right there in front of everybody.
Are there a lot of people around?
I don't know. I think there's just, like, I assume there's always a cook there just making something. But I don't know if that's true. But she says she's...
It sounds like a really, like... It sounds like one of those, like, industrial, like, restaurant kitchens. Like, it's really big and has a whole bunch of counters. So, like, I like that they can give her space. And she can give... Like, she's not in the way.
Yeah. She's, like, in a little corner. And she has, like, her own oven and everything, it feels like. Like, she has enough shit there to... It's probably... Her section is probably as big as her whole restaurant kitchen. And then they have more... is kind of what it feels like. She tells Rathan that she's not going to her room tonight because obviously it was terrifying. She got attacked. I thought that something more was going to come of this and they were going to start sharing a room.
Okay. Did they not?
But it doesn't happen. Oh. No. And it makes me sad.
Where does she sleep?
So she just goes back to her room.
Oh. Well, that's interesting.
But maybe she just stays up all night. Maybe they stay up all night. And then she doesn't go back to her room till the next day. But, like, I really thought that something was going to come of this. It just doesn't. So he asks to help her, and she says that there's not really much left to do. But she tells him he can get some red wine. So he pours them glasses and then says cheers to always feasting after spilling the blood of their enemies. Which I just love.
A very wrathy toast.
Yeah. She calls him a barbarian, and he says that he's proud she defended herself. And she asks if she killed the assailant. And he asks if it would matter if she did. And she says she doesn't want to be a murderer. But he says it's different, obviously, because it's self-defense. But then he does say, like, he's the one that killed him. We get it. Was a male, man.
Dude.
Guy.
Fella.
A dude. A fella. And she asks if, like, he got any info before he killed him, but he says that, like, this guy demon dude had cut his tongue out.
Oh my god.
Specifically to stop from giving away any information. And you're like, shit.
This is serious.
This is intense.
Yeah. There's something serious going on here for you to cut it. Like, oh, I guess they're demons, so, like, maybe they're harder to kill. But in my head, I'm thinking, like, cyanide pill.
Would that kill you?
No, I was thinking, like, wouldn't it be better to take a cyanide pill if you didn't want to spill, like, instead of torturing yourself by cutting off your own tongue?
Yeah. I guess maybe he was hopeful he wouldn't die and just he wouldn't have a tongue. I don't know.
I guess.
I feel like you could still, like, does he not know how to write? Is that...
Yeah, but I guess you can't
like you could still
torture to write.
I know, but if you're torturing somebody for long enough, like, they'll eventually give you what you want.
Are you an expert on torture?
Yeah, okay. Obviously.
Yeah. Catherine has tortured lots of people.
Emotionally. So, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, he cut out his tongue. He couldn't give any information. Wrath is kind of just standing there, and she thinks he's there, like, waiting for her judgment. But she just goes over and, like, hugs him, and it kind of, like, takes him aback a bit, and he eventually hugs her back. And they're just standing there until the timer goes off, and then she kisses him on the cheek and says thank you. Because, like, yeah, it's a nice bit of a sweet moment. So then she takes, she takes some bread out of the oven and roasted garlic, and she, like, takes a piece of bread, then puts roasted garlic on it, then goat cheese, and then pesto on top. And he makes one too, and he says he likes it more than the cannolis. And she just says, oh, sometimes, like, I add a poached egg to it, and it's really good. And Vittoria likes, and then she's like, she cuts herself off because, like, obviously she kind of remembers in that moment that Vittoria is dead.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a small moment of forgetting, which sucks. So he asks, like, why she stopped, and she says that she misses Vittoria, and sometimes she forgets she's gone. Then it all comes back, and part of her, like, feels terrible and guilt for that, for forgetting for a second, and another part of her just wants to lash out. And he says, like, he doesn't have personal experience with death, which seems insane. Isn't he, like, ages old?
I guess I feel like maybe he doesn't have personal experience with losing somebody he cares about. And, like, he doesn't have family.
Wild.
Apart from his brothers, but, like...
Yeah, none of them are really going to die, and they all hate each other. But I just feel like he had to have had somebody in the entirety of his life that he didn't hate. Anyway, he hasn't. But he says that, like, what she's describing is normal for mortals from what he knows. Because he knows a lot about mortals now. And this is kind of an interesting part, because last week you kind of said that her rage is kind of, like, out of character. But she says that lately she's been consumed with rage and anger since Vittoria's death. And she never used to be like this. And the intensity of her emotions doesn't scare her. But the fact that that doesn't scare her kind of scares her.
Oh, so...
Because she's like, that's not who she is.
Oh! I like that.
Yeah.
It's giving me answers. It was intentional.
Yeah. She also says that, like, when she was attacked just then in the tub, she was so annoyed that her Nona didn't teach her dark magic because she wanted to be able to defend herself better. And then she says, like, she wonders if it's actually her who is cursed. And Wrath goes still. And I'm like, that means yes. That means that she's the one that was cursed. Why? I don't know. But then she goes on to say that, like, people who love her get hurt. And she's always okay, other than this one incident where someone attacked her. But she says, like, what if she was a villain and then they took her memory away and the witches who died in the mortal world were, like, starting to remember her, so they were killed because of that. And I'm like, this is a giant leap. Why are we saying this if part of this isn't true? What is happening? But don't actually tell me any spoilers.
You just need to keep. Keep talking at this point.
I know. You can't say anything. But Wrath just says, like, maybe they all just dabbled in pursuits they shouldn't have, and he's just, like, not really giving us anything. He's not super convincing. So. No. Later they're in the training room again because she asked for this session after the attack because, like, she knows that she needs to train. And it's a lesson on gluttony. the room is like full of food and wine, and she's in like a luxurious dress and loads of jewelry, and she's just like chugging demonberry wine right now. Like, not very smart. And she is kind of a bit confused by the lesson because she's like, she doesn't drink to excess, so she's not sure what she's supposed to be learning here.
But isn't she already under greed, like under gluttony's, like, isn't she already under gluttony's spell at this point because she's chugging demonberry wine?
Mm-hmm.
But like, she doesn't realize that she's doing it?
No, she does, but she's just like, I think she's like, this isn't an issue for me. Like, gluttony isn't a sin that I'm like, but I think she just doesn't understand why he's making her chug the wine. And you're like, obviously it's because when you're drunk, you do shit you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise. But then she also realizes that the wine is making it harder for her to sense the magic. And she's like, interesting. So he pours her another glass and he tells her to down it and then pour herself another and to drink that too. And I'm like, she's going to die of alcohol poisoning.
She's going to have to pump her stomach.
Right? She's able to hold off for a bit, but then he like increases the power and she downs a glass and she starts to think that like if the princes nudge her to drink, she's going to be screwed because she can't fight it off when she's drinking. Which makes sense. So she walks over to Wrath and she thinks like she wants to stab him in the face with like break the bottle and stab him, but she also wants to kiss him. And then she's like, she's drunk too, but she's just like fascinated by his lips. So she touches them and then he tells her to focus and she's like, I am focused on his lips. And she asks why he hasn't seduced her because like obviously her and Fauna had that conversation earlier. And he tells her like it's probably best if she doesn't drink at the feast because like she's not gonna be able to fight it off if she's drunk.
And like this,
but
is
she
how
says that he worries.
This is how she gets when she's intoxicated. She just wants to jump his bones.
Exactly. She starts to sway because she's drunk, so she sits on his lap, which I love. And she says the whole court is wondering why he hasn't seduced her and that avoidance is cowardice. And he says, like, he knows what she's up to and he hasn't seduced her because he currently doesn't want to. And we all know it's a consent thing with him. Like, he wants her to, like, actually want to.
Yeah, but that's just, like, not a cool thing to say.
No, it's not. And, like, she immediately is like, it would have hurt less if he, like, stabbed her in the heart. And you're like, and you don't love him? She tries to like pick up a chocolate strawberry with a fork, but she's like way too drunk and keeps missing. So he starts feeding them to her, which is just like sweet. And I'm like, they're so cute. But he does say if she breathes a word of this tomorrow that he vows revenge. And she says that she probably won't remember this act of chivalry anyway because she's too drunk right now. He asks if she remembers what they were talking about, and I assume he means seducing her. And she says no, and he calls her a liar. And he, like, starts biting her ear and everything, and immediately her drunkenness just vanishes. And he says, so am I, in a sense. And I'm assuming he's saying he's a liar as well. And then he starts to kiss her neck.
Oh.
And we're like, okay.
So that went from, like, 0 to 50 real fast.
Yeah, he's basically seducing her now like she wants to, and she doesn't feel drunk anymore, which is, like, very convenient that he can just take away drunkenness. And she kind of has a moment of thinking of, like, in the mortal world, it's super sinful for women to enjoy sex, and she kind of has a, like, sexual awakening and a sexual freeing in this moment, which is interesting because, like, that's not really what it was about, but anyway. He asks what she wants, and she says, even if I want to say no, and he says, especially then, which is like, we're really driving home that he loves consent. Yeah. But she just asks him to take off her necklace, and he asks her to tell him about what happened in the Sin Quarter, like the fantasy that she had. She called out his name, and he was like, what were you thinking about? What was the fantasy that, like, was brought to you? So we kind of get a mashing of scenes of, like, her telling him about the fantasy and what he's doing in the moment. So she says he was laying behind her and he was slowly unbuttoning his shirt that she was wearing. So in the current moment, he's like teasing her collarbone because she's like wearing a strappy dress. And he asks if she wants him to do the same now. And she nods, but he says he needs to hear her say it. So he asks if she wants him to stop, and she says no. So he pushes the straps of her dress down and like is massaging her shoulders. And she says in the fantasy, he asked her if he was her favorite sin. But in the fantasy, she like was too distracted to answer at the time because he was taking her clothes off, which makes sense. So he asks, like, what's her answer now? And she says, at this specific point in time, he is her favorite sin. So her dress is, like, I guess, around her waist or something, because her boobs are out.
Wow.
Yeah, it felt like, I was like, oh, it must just be, like, little strappies that he just pulled them down and just, like, flopped out.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like, in most dresses that I wear, like, even if you pulled the straps down, they'd still be held up by the titties. But I guess not this dress.
Well, and like, isn't everything like set? I feel like we find out. I remember we had this issue when we were doing book 1.
Oh my God,
we were like, what is the setting? What time period is it? And then I read ahead and I found out, and I came back and I said, I found out! And I can't remember. It must have been in book 3. But now I forget. Like, is it, because like, she had a metal fucking corset. So I would think that every dress she had would also be corseted.
Yeah.
So.
But I guess this one's specifically for this moment. Okay. I don't know. She's not wearing a bra. Right.
But like, type, did they have bras in the 1700s
I don't
or the
know.
1800s or whenever?
She's not wearing any undergarments, I think. Lovely. She says. So that's
scandalous.
Something. It is scandalous. So he starts playing with like her nipples and everything, and she feels like she like leans back and feels how hard he is, of course. And she continues and says like, I guess she was wearing his shirt and a metal corset and her skirt at the time, I'm assuming.
I didn't think she was wearing her metal skirt at the time, or her metal corset at the time. I think she took it off.
Yes. But she's still wearing a skirt, I guess, and his shirt. So he pulled up her skirt and was like fingering her, and it felt almost as good as the Crescent Shallows. But she woke up and he was like, did you wake up before you climaxed? And she says yes. And he asks if like she wants him to make up for that now. And she says, please. So he like puts his hand on her like ankle and works up her leg under her dress. And she thinks it feels better than the Sin Corridor and the Crescent Shallows combined. And she pushes back like against his hardness, and he's like touching her, and she starts to like take control and ride his hand. And she basically just like immediately comes, of course. And when she's like done, he just fixes her dress, and she can feel that he's still hard, and she thinks that they can do more without it being like actual sex and accepting the marriage. Because I think last week he said that like,
no, it was earlier. Earlier she spoke to Fauna, and like Fauna said that like they have to have sex, and then also there's a ceremony. I didn't include it because I didn't think it was super important, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's what she's thinking now. So she's actually thinking like she wants to have sex with him now, but like it won't be accepting because they still need the ceremony, which is like, that's
just an excuse because
intense.
She's like in the mood for sex.
Yeah, she's very hot to trot.
Yeah.
Horny, but yeah. And also like when he was like playing with her, I was like, is this her first orgasm? And I was like, it can't be. Anyway, it was.
It was?
We'll get a bit more on that later.
Shit.
Yeah. Ugh. And she's like in her 20s. When you figure that out. I guess she shares a room with her twin, so it's a bit harder, but still. Ugh. Anyway. So she pulls her skirt up completely so that she's just, like, on him. And then she kind of second guesses if she actually wants this. But it feels so good that she's just like, no, I'm going to go for it. But then Wrath immediately just tells her that training is done. And you kind of get, like obviously she's, like, pissed.
Yeah.
But I'm like, could he tell that she was second guessing? And, like, he does, like, that she's not in her complete right state of mind. But still, obviously, like, she's going to be annoyed by that because she wanted him. And this feels like a rejection, even though, like, I don't really think it is. But she thinks she's pissed that, like, he called it training and he just made her come. Like, that is shitty.
Yeah.
But he's just like, it's what you asked for, seduction. And he says now that she knows what she enjoys, she can do it with her own hand. And you're like, oh, this really was her first orgasm, I guess.
What about it?
So the next day she's talking to Fauna and she just tells her everything about that whole situation. And Fauna's like, oh, so did you return the favor with your hand or your mouth? And then she has to ask what she meant by mouth. And you're like, of course. Anyway, Fauna's also like, you know, maybe he kicked you out because he didn't want you to do something that, like, you weren't ready for or weren't in the right headspace for, which is kind of what I already said. And she says, or because, like, someone could have just walked in there, like, he didn't want to just be having sex with you in the training room. And then she says he was definitely thinking of that moment when he took matters into his own hands later and basically, like, got himself off. Emilia just kind of disagrees with it all and says, like, the public wouldn't deter him. But Fauna says, like, most of public sex actually only goes on in lust and gluttony, not in the other houses. So, like, she doesn't think that he would want to have sex in public, which is interesting. And Emilia actually thinks she doesn't know why she cares so much that, like, he said no. Because she doesn't want to be married. So, like, it's good that he's also hesitant, but it also hurts her feelings. So, like, there's
sort
more
of a
feelings
hypocrite.
here, obviously. 100%. And then she says, like, she doesn't want the matron to overhear them and tell Wrath. And I didn't know who she was talking about in this moment, but it's the matron of Poisons and Spells or whatever her name was. Because I was kind of confused because they have a full-on conversation, and I was like, who the fuck is the matron? Is it, like, the matron, the mother, and the crone? Is that who the matron is? Like, who is she talking about? But I'm pretty sure she's talking about the matron of Curses and Spells. But Fauna says that their animosity is centuries old, and some say that the matron's daughter was cursed, and the prince did nothing to save her. And Emilia asks if the daughter's here now, but nobody knows. And some say that, like, I guess Wrath banished her from his highness. She doesn't say Wrath. His highness banished her from his circle. So I'm like, is it Wrath? Is it Pride? Who are we talking about? Or the matron retrieved and hid her. And this makes Emilia think of the wailing she heard near the serpent statue that you were just talking about. And she can't imagine Wrath sending somebody there as a punishment, but she thinks maybe the matron put her daughter there to hide her. And she wonders then if, like, she's hiding from another prince, like if she's hiding from Pride there, because she obviously thinks of, like, La Prima Striga story of, like, the first witch and the bride of Pride. Like, she's putting these two stories together, kind of like we just did, because they're similar stories. So she wonders if the matron of, like, Curses and Poisons is actually the first witch. And then she wonders why she's here, if that's the case. And she wonders if, like, the matron has, like, a bargain with Wrath, or if she has a secret of his, and that's why, like, she's just allowed to stay there as who she is. So it's interesting and a huge leap that, like, Emilia's going to. She's like, she's the first witch. Bam. I'm like, that also would mean she's a goddess.
Yes.
Too.
Well,
so
would it though? First witch is different than the goddesses.
Was she? Was the first witch the daughter of the goddess? And then, is that God? Was the first witch the daughter of one of the goddesses, and then her daughter married Pride? Is that what happened? Or was the first witch
I don't know. I don't
goddess?
know if the first... So when we hear about the first witch, we hear about her in terms of how the other witches see her. So I think the other witches see her as a goddess, but I don't think she's on the same level as the matron, mother, and crone. Okay. Not matron, maiden, mother, and crone. But I don't know if I don't think she's related to them.
But I thought that all witches came from one of them.
No, I think all witches come from the first witch.
Because last week they said that their magic is related to the goddess that they should pray to. So, like, maybe you're right, and they're like, I guess we don't know the relationship between the goddesses and the first witch. But I just kind of assumed that you must have come from one of the 3 streams. I assumed there were 3 streams of witches, that they each get different powers. But it could be that they all come from the first witch, and then they just get different powers, and it's not based on, like, lineage. It's just based on the magic you get.
I don't know.
I have no idea. Anyway, it doesn't really matter in this moment, because Emilia's putting a bunch of shit together. We don't know what it means. So they knock on the matron's door, and Emilia says that she has questions on curses. And then she just doesn't really ask any questions on curses. But they go inside, and she sees, actually, the smells inside remind her of her home, and it makes her think, like, her family is safe because she's down here. And I'm like, I don't think I'd assume that. Yeah. I was like, this is a wild assumption, but I guess you have to assume that, or you'd, like, drive yourself crazy. So,
but, like, was it part of her contract? No.
I don't think so. Maybe it was. I don't remember well enough. Hopefully it was. But she goes in and she sees that there's, like, a raven skull there with runes on it. She doesn't actually know it's a raven skull, but she sees a skull and it has runes on it. And she asks the matron about it, but she says it's a raven skull, and it makes her think of the skulls that she's seen. And she asks if the runes animate the skull. But the matron just explains that, like, she meditates over the skulls and etches what the raven wants her to see in them. So it's, like, interesting magic-y shit. But she asks if the runes can be used to enhance source. And the matron says yes, but not for those who are source, like goddesses. Which is interesting because, like, obviously we realized, not obviously, but last week we realized, or the week before, that whatever power Emilia has, her source, isn't like the stuff explained in the books. So I'm like, does that mean that she's a goddess? Is hers different?
I don't know.
We don't know.
Do you see what I mean? Like, this is why there's so much going on. Like, there's too many mysteries happening all at one time. And they're not connected at all.
I know. I don't understand. Emilia also thinks, like, the matron is likely immortal if she's had this, like, centuries beef with Wrath. And she also has a shade of purple in her hair that's the same color as Emilia's tattoo and the lichikara that she used to see on humans when she was in the human world. She thinks that there must be a connection.
Oh my god!
Somewhere. I don't see it.
I totally forgot that she used to be able to see people's auras.
Yeah.
Holy shit!
I don't know if it's important. Who knows?
My bad.
That's fine. So yeah, I'm assuming something will come up with that. So she asks if a witch can use, like, we get that the runes are called arcane symbols. So she asks if you can use them to enhance, like, with spells to enhance the spell. And she also asks if a prince or a witch could animate a skull. And the matron says it's possible. And she asks if there were symbols on the skull, but there weren't. So it was likely someone closer to source that actually animated the skulls. If they weren't animated by runes, it had to be somebody closer to the source. So like a goddess. And I'm like, that's interesting.
Or a prince?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like, I don't really understand.
Do the princes use source, or is that just a goddess witch magic?
I have no idea. I don't understand. Yeah, so we also get that I think the matron's name is Celestina. We must have got that last week because I didn't realize we knew it. But she thinks like if Celestina is the first witch, then that means that like the wife of Pride is alive because her daughter is still rumored to be alive. So that means that like witches weren't killed to be the bride of Pride because his bride is still technically alive. So we're making a lot of jumps.
So not only are we jumping at Celestina being the first witch, we're also jumping at the fact that the one wailing underneath the statue is her daughter.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Fauna's just like, should we go back now? And she like seems kind of iffy about it. But before they leave, Emilia asks about like how someone would get knowledge from the curse tree instead of a wish or a hex. And Celestina says that you'd have to carve the true name of the one you seek information about into the tree and then take a leaf and break it in the presence of that person that you want information about, which is interesting because I assumed that this was about Vittoria. She wants information about her death. So I was like, she'd carve Vittoria's name, but like she can't really be in her presence because she's dead. So I don't really know how this helps.
Well, and like a lot is being mentioned about this tree. Like, this tree can do a heck of a lot.
It can. So I assumed it was Vittoria, but then Emilia asks what happens if she doesn't know the true name. And I'm like, obviously she wasn't thinking about Vittoria, but she is thinking of the first witch, and she only knows like her title. She says, is that enough? And Celestina says like, no, you need to know their true name. Like the true name thing is a big deal. So later she's in the Rainbow Library trying to find something about the first witch, and she knows Wrath previously like said to Emilia that like she calls her the first witch, so he must know her by a different name. And she's just trying to find information. She doesn't really want to ask him. She feels awkward about their last encounter.
I mean, her name is probably not Celestina in real life.
Celestine,
like, come on,
the, like library, and there's nothing about her in there either, which she thinks is weird. Exactly. She finds a journal that has like descriptions of what happens to mortals when curses went wrong. So apparently, like, if mortals are cursed and something goes wrong, they usually end up in the underworld because they often crave blood and seek life and like hearts, which is interesting and makes her think of her sister and the first bride who was said to have lost, like, her heart was carved out, I think Wrath said. So she wonders, and this is another leap, if La Prima Striga used the darkest magic to remove her daughter's power, and maybe losing her heart was like a consequence of this magic.
I don't understand.
And it wasn't just
why
like,
would the Prima use the darkest magic?
It wasn't that she was killed.
Power?
It was that some like the magic took her heart.
Oh,
I think that was like something that was in the like story of like because she fell in love with Pride and she's like, I'm taking your magic.
Oh,
so she just wonders if like when she took her magic,
we're making a lot of leaps.
Like something went wrong and it took her heart too. And I'm like, this is a leap, but okay.
Release her from where?
Yeah. And she also remembers her Nona saying that it like that could release La Prima, and I'm like, I don't even understand what that means. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anything. I don't understand. So it makes Emilia think that like maybe the daughter could be ripping out hearts because she's like seeking blood now and seeking hearts because a spell went wrong, or she's just killing the brides because she doesn't want them to take her spot, or she might just be killing people to like spite her mother. There's like a lot of options here. Don't know. So she decides to go to just ask the matron if she's the La Prima Striga. And I'm like, why didn't you just do that last time? And to ask her about the triple moon mirror and the temptation key, because obviously Envy brought those up. But when she gets to the matron's door, there's a note there saying "gone for a spell," which I just love the double entendre of that. So good. She waits for a bit, but then it starts to like snow, so she ends up leaving. She goes to her room, and Wrath is inside, and he asks about the mess in the library, and he says he knows that she's looking for information on La Prima Striga. And she says, of course she is. It's her history. And he says, like, I can tell you're lying. And he says he can help. But she says after the last lesson, she thought it was, like, she had to do it on her own, because he said, use your own hand. And he's just like, they have 3 days to the feasts. And he asks if she wants a lesson, and she agrees to do, like, one more lesson tonight.
I find that him, like, he didn't acknowledge, she was like, I thought I had to do it myself. Like, you would think that he would have said something.
Yeah, he's just like, oh, speaking of lessons, do you want another? I also, like, why didn't she just ask him for information? If he's willing to give you information, take it.
Yeah.
But anyway, she doesn't. So they go to the training room, and she's wearing, like, a super hot black dress that, like, slits up to her thigh, and she has shoes that she had, like, specifically made that have, like, a snake that, like, go up her ankle and then, like, end up on her thigh. And, like, she picked this outfit specifically, had it made specifically for this training session about pride. And I'm like, okay. So he starts using his power on her, and it was kind of cringy, because, like, she completely is like, this isn't affecting me. I'm so good. Like, you're nothing. Your magic is nothing anymore. And you're like, no, this is pride. It's working on you.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, oh God, I hate it. But anyway, she says, like, she's better than him and his brother should be scared. And she does say a line that I love, because there's so many feminist lines in these books. But she says, there's nothing more dangerous than a woman who owns who she is and apologizes to no one. Which I was like, love that quote. Perfect. She also says she believes she's powerful, so she is. And that power comes from many sources, and she has many weapons in her arsenal now. And she says that she could own him if she wanted, because she's obviously being prideful. And he would be powerless. And she says that she thinks he would secretly like that, especially in one area. So we're like, interesting. She wants to dominate him, and she thinks he would like to be submissive. So she walks over to him super seductively and backs him into a wall, and she, like, trails her finger down his shirt to, like, his pants button, and she can tell that he's already hard. And she runs her hand over him, and the magic snaps away. And she thinks that, like, she knew this would happen because of his morals. Like, he doesn't want her to be under the influence of his power when things turn sexual. And she thinks, like, this was her plan all along. And I'm like, why? Because it doesn't work out well. But that's not really her fault, I guess. But an image appears in her head then, and it's like she's in two places at once. Like, it's so vivid. But in the image, they've snuck off from a party and are making out. And he pulls down her dress, and she puts her hand down his pants, and she tells him to be quiet so that nobody can hear them. And she knows his body so well. It's like she's done this hundreds of times. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm assuming she makes him come because he shudders. And she, like, takes her hand out of his pants. So I'm assuming. But we don't explicitly get that. Then she kisses him and whispers to meet her at the witching hour tonight. He knows where. And Wrath, like, calls her name and brings her back to the present. And she says the vision, or she thinks to herself, she doesn't say anything about it, but she thinks the vision felt like a memory. And she just steps away from him because she feels like she's losing her reality. And he, like, looks super concerned, but she's just, like, tries to, like, drag up the prideful feeling again to mask that she doesn't know what's going on. So she looks down, and he's actually not hard anymore because he's worried about her. So she says, it seems their lesson is over, and she walks out. And she thinks, like, this memory vision kind of stuff keeps happening when they're, like, being intimate, about to have sex or stuff. Like, I think it happened once before.
Did it?
Yeah.
But it
the vision, she had a vision of, like, on top of him riding him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I do remember that.
So, yeah, she doesn't think it's a fabrication of the realm, but she doesn't really understand, like, what it is. But she does think she might understand another one of Wrath's secrets, but she doesn't really know how it could be possible, but she's gonna find out. And I'm like, what did you figure out was his secret? That, like, you know how to make him come? Is that the secret? Like, you've done this before? This is a memory? Like, I don't know what she figured out, but that's what she's at. And I'm like,
well,
was she right in
well,
that?
I feel like she's saying she doesn't really know how it could be possible, but she's gonna find out. So I think she's assuming that these memories are true.
Yeah.
And she doesn't really understand, like,
how she's
because she has mentioned already that she is worried that, like, she's the one who's cursed and that they've taken her memories.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, maybe this is what she is thinking about. Like, she's thinking that she doesn't really know how it happened, but she's worried that maybe her memories are to have been taken, and, like, so she needs to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, and the reason for my spiraling.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, that is it for this week. Next week's going to be exciting. I can feel it. That's my prediction. But yeah, so that wraps it up. And if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in any of our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Facebook at coffeeandcoread, and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week we will be finishing up Kingdom of the Curse, chapters 26 to 35. So make sure to follow along, and if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.